Dear Maxine Waters, please help me slash you slash each slash everyone by allowing mandated law and all that and me not to entertain a quality of fact treatment nature. For example, when they have positive or negative treatment about anything, or truth treatments or fact treatment. For example, criminal insidiousness natures. Make criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, and identity treatments. Someone could debate that their premises treatments, their sequence treatments, their criminally foreign influence premises treatments are going to be evidences. But we don't have this quality of fact treatment nature permitted by courts and by police forms that with overt criminal enterprises and with private ones and with insidiousness that everyone was sewn to roles with by a breaching method that our founders had to hide their roles too. With getting finally put up that the Constitution should be unabridged. That means a simultaneous values slash value progression. Value slash values progression. The slash is where we are inherent, active, and progressive. Simultaneously, those values are one here now. Distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Where we are active, we are quality of diffusion. This is a trap. You have to know American history from Wethersfield, Connecticut, but you guys don't. Congress people A through Z. You guys came through campuses, the republics of a campus and its system. This is an identity, a human volume science, individual, grouped, ages, areas, sexes. Ancients realized and figured out how and why, as science actually honest reveals. We have to be simultaneously conscious about what is invisible but still discernible, slash hyper-invisible but still discernible, but only in one way, going by what is hyper-discernible. That which is the volume science, actually, without theory, individual, grouped, and together, species identity of volume slash S, making more and more positive that it is positive to itself also, or it is forced away from here. Earth's temporary difference relative to the rest of space nature. Note where 3 years, okay, we won't get into theory. So in other words, a breaching method caused slavery. Instead, through our schools, and differentially note, arrays of opinions, they blame it on other things other than themselves. They blame it on George Washington. We know the database relationships and uses of them were in layers, criminally foreign influenced. We know that only standing criminal insidiousness natures could be. So how could they debate, honestly, the history of archaeological evidences, such as the republic for which we stand, such as yin yang? There was a principal child abusers campus that has and had a former police chief, or still, I'm not sure technically, Cintron has his family, has family members interbranch, everyone speaking through other people, and they force you to use their names. These are kept with overt criminal enterprises, child offenders, and as leaders of the kids. And no, as uses of the ground locations. See, the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, originally and still, and all the hundreds of nations share here, not the way our violence spine is supposed to be, and this tied to our syntax nature. Why and how we have to use words like identity, like volume, like value, and volume. Every identity in the dictionary is an identity of volume distinct, where volume is nature slash nature as value, as a simultaneous nature. And so, to speak perfectly. See, we have people with the sciences abridged originally and still, and that's not by accident, tied to people's quote, sense and sensibilities, unquote, Jane Austen's phrase, but as the human volume science, in other words, where everyone's still debating about things that are not debatable, and they would stop debating them. Only if it wasn't for uses perfected of all locations, and then through other motivations, nature's needs, interests, and then further from all locations further back to everyone had to keep, that was used remotely by what keeps everyone needing to counter the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and the real reasons that we have to use words. We have to use words like predicate, and we have to use phrases like predicate act, and we have to understand where and how the sciences share the identity of what is hyper-simultaneous, which is to discern that which is not just the species identity of volume, not just grouped, and not just individual, but as that hyper-simultaneous that we know. We don't know the extent of it, but we know to an extent, that's it. One hyper-simultaneous, at least that's what it is. Anyone who wants to debate that, see, that's how we stay. Stupid, fake, in other words, free speech wasn't defended. That's one of the things that even Jim Crow laws, when they speak about them now, free speech isn't defended. Other has to be pretended, so they have to pretend. They have to do tricks with their mind to themselves and other about pretending to be for freedom of expression. Meanwhile, all the locations, they have the news attach me and my family to other people, to fake words, fake ties to other people, fake natures of ties to other people. They have each age. I went to 9 campuses. There were recorded predicate acts rolls on everyone's campus. And this is specifically the only way we could discern it. It's the breaching method. It's criminal foreign influences that every modern country has to use that phrase. And it knew that it built where and how the phenomena of everyone being and having self-valued, being and having been grouped in the individual country identities and species identities, and talk about it as syntax nature, increasingly tactical ulterior from that which is native pure. So to us, and as ourselves, the value of Native American is increasingly hyper-native. See, anything, this is about the invisible / hyper-invisible. And there are 3 identities of each that are discernible with science. Same way the invisible but discernible, the subject, the predicates, identity of value / value progression. The subjects. And the nature of debate regarding such. And the nature and the needs for uses of experts, legitimately and increasingly originally and still not, and that really recorded, not just used self-value, but used remotely. They have the same names. In other words, they had rules with all these programs, DACA and all that. They have people like 2 Mendez police, 2 Domain brothers, their families, and their roles with Wethersfield police. Before they were police, they were recorded, involved, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, where judges in other countries are involved with them, like Koreans, and with identity, and people with that run the stores, or run the stores policings through different ownerships of it. So in other words, originally and still, clear as day. This is many pray. That's why George Washington had to leave in Wethersfield, Connecticut. Slavery. He could only counter-extort them because there were roles with it sickly distinctly in the North and South. and sickly distinctly in those countries that had no choice to entertain such. You know how Great Britain was bigger than England. See, there are proofs that the archaeological, now we're going to do theory. They won't even let you talk about the proofs because their theories are to keep worse than obfuscated and self-valued, because all that is used remotely. What made the sick people with those sick laws against everyone sickly distinctly, let alone those who were most by those what they call colonization laws? Truth, but constant colonization to the thing is not a person. So they will choose war and that now, and everyone's defending quality of fact, cheap nature, premises treatments. If they made the wrong mistakes in courts, especially they know they didn't let the kids read. They whipped them, hurt them. What did they want their actions to be? See, that breaching method had already been employed. And so St. Nicholas, I read on Wikipedia, he was let out of jail by Constantine, and or those who were connected to Constantine, and the value progression. But since before then, since before modern nations' religious messengers, multi-front, they caught and to counter and doing counter positions, demonstrably wrongly per their own scripts, right up front. No take sequence true. Because this method of child abuse, I call it the principal child abusers campus, and one years ago. There are police forms associated with Quinnipiac University, the taking of statistics, all data reception, identity reception, facts reception, originally still criminal insidious natures of positive and negative. It shows how remotely all investigations, all thought is used. The child abuse is was recorded women roles, and with military police, all kinds of ways juxtaposed. The Eastern States Narcotic Drugs Task Force, involved with a whole bunch of ones from Central Connecticut State University, all along that route from Wethersfield to there. People involved with this, Kalvinskis is one of the names. Identity theft, some frauds, little tricks. They try to pretend little instances to make it look like other, and then try to make the people, that's true, that's perjury. No, those are exceptions and demonstrations. The same thing. And like this Joshua Julian, I never had anything to do with him at all. Involved on Facebook with interbranch Facebook pages, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with a principal child abuser. Worse than tortures and all kinds of other things that brought this up too. Same people involved with the World Trade Center attack, leading up to it, and in that context, you have some sick doctors with mental health and various natures of courts have been fabricating things into databases and simultaneously delusions wrought. So we don't have mandated law followed at locations. Now these are people mixed with prisons and forensics locations involved with the same house/S, involved with instances with them with sequence shifts and crimes outside and crime roles with fact-cheating nature-oriented predicate acts with their worst patients and criminals, and against innocent people, and against all that was really recorded. So we have uses of types of things juxtaposed because they have types of experts who then defend themselves as identities and identity of, like the FBI, CIA. The delusions raw too. You feel let someone make an opinion about anything important by the law, like what Jim Crow laws are about. We have the theater. We have weaponized that sense and sensibility by the quote fake news, unquote, quoting President Trump, President/chief. The locations, areas, and states, no matter how powerful a leader gets, no matter how weak they get, no matter how loved they're not, they're going to force them to collusion with criminal insidious natures of positive and negative treatment. Nature, the breaching method knew would continue to demonstrate. The real causes but now through all kinds of arrays of A through Z. Then countries A through Z all just to here. Nature is going to demonstrate it wanted us and needs us. Yeah, our entire value, every single person individually grouped in together, but tactically ulterior from how we are now. All we have to do is admit that and syntactically counter hyper predicate acts roles and hyper predicate acts roles we could discern relative to what is worse than war crimes. That which is claiming to be able to speak for stability, for example, and or for emotions, or be able to read from relative to instances, because that's with the sequence shifts. That's also simultaneously with the quality of fact sheet nature. In other words, where kids are going into the courts all the time. The reason they're going into courts all the time, because the quality of fact sheet nature was never at any place. So they backed you all inter-branch, individually grouped and together, into fighting styles. As victims, as that victim predator /S body, as the identity value that was valuing not only Jim Crow laws, but the counters to it that were themselves were exactly, those were engineered by the breaching method too. As long as it's tactically ulterior from the species science and correlation true always and using exception nature per its method. This is a trinity. There are distinct natures. A criminal and citizen's nature is going to make exceptions distinctly from someone who's not with criminal foreign influence, especially regarding such things uncharged and that need to be accounted off interbranch locations, and we need to address how the lawyers and how the interbranch could be and were originally and still simultaneously criminally foreign influence and delusion raw. Take witch trials. We know to an extent they made that up. And we know to an extent they had and have theories and physical delusions. They're experts on logic, and they are interculturally charged. They are pretending to perceive things. They're even just attaching people to fake words. They're pretending passions and emotions, and they're getting away with it. But by knowing that and how the interbranch has been used in those locations for the same thing, those same people, their kids, their family members, their uses of corners of streets. This is a pathology of homes and then of infrastructures, people stacking, only possible of being. And the suburbs are tactically denatured, reliant upon food systems. Everything's tactically denatured to cause negative value nature, progressions, acts of nature. They built fake exceptions and exception nature. That's not. And so they want to have everything A or B. It's this or that. And only fighting to keep exceptions, exception nature from being demonstrated. The breaching method measures and maintains the pseudo-sophistications of our agencies, incapable of defending themselves and of us at the same time, but them pretending other at the same time. It already had remote uses of all locations in layers. And all that needing to, right back to all locations. It knew it would have to value each. These answers about what the predicate acts delivery system was. Watch, if one of the evidences too, I have to be a lawyer. The lawyers anyone who's honest knows that the lawyers were in collusion too. Everyone were victim predators. Simultaneously, delusions wrought. Even when they were trying not to be. Everyone was telling them, everyone could no longer afford nature as the voice. Nature's identity of relationship to itself. Invisible / hyper invisible, its way. Everyone, an individual grouped in species of volume, its way. People could debate that. You guys, they have the locations where they have news media. In other words, they have been using the journalism. They've been wanting and needing to have fights in courts by their roles planting evidences first, but with the courts in the police forms. And see, they get away with it because we left out how, since they were kids, they were kept criminally foreign influence for what I caught them doing intercampuses. Then they want to speak about pretend anyone could have. If you can't afford, in other words, to understand what me or anyone else is trying to say about the denied rights and value of Native Americans, of colonists, of Native Americans further, of Americans, citizens, again, as an additional value as themselves. Could be more and more negative nature. We have to go by what is native, pure, true. But we have to be that which is native, pure. We have to be its identity of hyper-simultaneous. We can't be having the theories of the interbranch to juxtapose with their criminality, attaching people to fake quotations, even as complete conversations about me and my father. One of the people that was right, and we were in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center right before the attack in Manhattan. And there was post-dated documents that had been presented to the panel of judges. And then we came home and then found and saw on the news that the World Trade Center had been hit. Leading up to that, and since, the same people that had been involved with that internationally had been so through. And as people with Wethersfield, Connecticut, with the Wethersfield Police Department, and with the interbranch locations on and off the state judicial branch offices, people that have been spreading slanders, identity thefts, and frauds rules, know how one of the things that was never countered, that it was against the Native and is against the Native Americans and the colonists and ourselves and everyone sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too. We haven't discerned because we haven't even. It's how identity thefts, frauds, slanders, 3, because the value, where there are 3 natures, where nature is value, / value as nature, where and how. For example, the subject and the predicate are all parts of English. See how it has the finite, a finite inside the word the. The definite article, the. This is each letter of the English alphabet spells a word, and each word spells out a sentence. This is not theory. Theory comes with it. Theory was and is and has been used. Self-valued, criminally foreign influenced databases and roles with them, and natures of positive and negative treatments, by them the only voices. This is where and how each sickly distinctly was backed into that an identity of human science /S that was / is abridged Constitution. We're supposed to get George Washington can tell no lies. That's the answer. He said, get the Constitution unabridged. He communicated that. He said he can tell no lies. And he said it about a cherry tree, reportedly. But he came to Connecticut, CT. And he had to leave slavery here, between New York and Boston, entrenched, north and south. New York and Boston had slavery. Sickly, distinctly, no. Again, to keep out sickly, distinctly, for not being discerned. And that's recorded so many ways. And see, look at the nature of the people who want to, they're playing a game trying to pretend that they could speak for calmness or stability and or about someone else's, what they appear. They prevent people from speaking calm. And when they raise their, and they're also attaching people to fake conversations. They've been using these triage places for this, where they have real things going down, and they also had roles with it from before that, because they have fact-cheating nature-oriented roles. They have uses of people that with mental health, with psychiatry and with psychology, with their databases, with their uses of things in databases, intercampuses of each age and nature, even public schools and private schools in collusion. with the illusion. We have, since before cars, that which we know was involved with the torture and slavery against our founding parents, let alone those hurt most by it. That's evidence. Thank God nature will demonstrate positive value nature and negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, in demonstration of some of entertainment of things with a system like those laws. It will demonstrate criminal insidiousness manifest. And we have to use this phrase because the science is sharing identity, boxings. See, boxing's martial arts in wrestling, they are by the rules. And there are proofs that they're ordered by the ancient republic. It was with yin-yang and alpha and omega, used to teach about exceptions and exception nature, because our nature is one nature. Yin-yang can never part. It will only stay too. It will only stay positive and negative to the extent it has. Everything is positive and everything has negative, from our perspective, and its identity with it. The same way our perspective is. Where and how we are, it's our volume, but distinctly. Everyone has an identity that is relationship to positive and negative simultaneously, and hyper simultaneously. But see, we have a quality of fact, cheap in nature that is prevented offensively. We have a quality /IES of the law increasingly incapable of defending itself, and uses of time treatment simultaneously used too fast, too slow. If they did quality of fact, cheap in nature proper, came through a campus I led, the bad things would happen. They would stop, not because people would go, in other words, you would find out where and how the people of the jails, certain kind of victim predator, have been kept at locations, kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, finite, active, and progressive lies, identity thefts, frauds, and slanders types, instances, roles, as the sequence shifts, for example. I never brought up a boxing gym, let alone the one in Cromwell, brought up by people with Sandy Hook, for example. A whole bunch of people involved, Weathersfield, interbranch, intercities through time, with former director of the FBI in his defendant capacities in 2006, after it was proven post-dated documents had been shown right to the panel of judges right before the World Trade Center attack in 9/11. And since, too, those are the same people with Connecticut news media. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They got the campuses and parks and uses of the ends of the paths into the parks, involved with police forms through time, involved with uses of confessions and uses of roles at locations, with where and how differential criminal foreign influences is present and was present. So where and how the courts are differentially, so even when they're not, they're increasingly though, differentially, increasingly criminally foreign influence. And that is used remotely, not just through that. But that's relative to where there are like 1/3/5 points. Is that all points? That's the point. But first and simultaneously, where and how the people are involved with what I caught them, where you guys want to make the subjects too, parted. Okay, we'll do that. I'm just going to note that first. See, you guys aren't following mandated law. And so there are all kinds of ways that there are all kinds of medicine and you know, where there are sick mental health people that have physical delusions and theories, with judges that have been hiding their lie progressions and uses of locations next to campuses, and themselves used as victim predators, not even realizing too, because they have hundreds of nations here. They've been entertaining narratives by, you know, honesty and science and care, especially as a parent of a republic for American history, let alone for the citizens hurt by it having been born unliberated They had to entertain themselves needing to try to get money, still entertaining. They couldn't explain those laws without giving themselves up. They couldn't speak for the nature of the law. And they have you guys incapable of defending how the lawyers told you to speak and teach. You guys were backed from the youngest ages. You're going to learn from. We have to. This is about the predicate acts delivery system method. This is about criminal and insidious natures of positive and negative treatments. This is about identity thefts and frauds methods. This is about where and how you're going to see as victims, but as victim predators. They have people trying to counter, where you can't counter and look at the way the people, anyone, makes opinions when someone says it's unnatural. It's going to cause negative value nature progressions, acts and natures, Hartford, Connecticut, let alone New York City. And don't forget, I'm not forgetting you, humanity, volume, every country, hundreds of countries. Just know there are just too many names. That's part of the game. This method knew that it could trick, hurt, persuade, force, take as awe, shock and awe, countries A through Z, sophistications A through Z, archetypal criminal enterprises, self-valuing that and how, locations, areas, and states, criminal decisions, positive and negative treatments, now having been sustained, what nature demonstrates causes that. Now having been sustained, blaming those causes on other things other than themselves. Which nature was demonstrating things true, but it was also, nature was trying to demonstrate and does demonstrate the correlation / discorrelation. That and how there was a breaching method and was a breaching method. There were laws employed that if anyone spoke against them wrong, in other words, tried to speak against where we lived, where everyone lived, they were that kind of a slave. They would hurt them. They would make an example of them, of their families. Now, that was not because they wanted to, because they were only capable of increasingly. And when do you think that went away? Those entrenchments in place of where that is obligated syntax from the youngest grades. In place of that, we have arrays of narratives. They have physical delusions juxtaposed as relevant to where and how they have sense and sensibilities that call people names, that pretend to be mental experts. And the mental experts are criminally foreign influenced. And delusions raw. Again, just relevant to their whole kind of, in other words, that's why and how too. The World Trade Center is involved with insurance companies and investigation, all victim predators. They can't defend themselves and afford a quality of fact treatment nature. They don't value hierarchies. Ancients would know anything invisible is only valuable to discern the invisible, but still discernible. And then that too has to be contemplated to make sure it has to be contemplated, because that level of care, to care extra, is the difference between what is the system here that makes evolution's fruits and gifts, and more forever nature here that is also further positive onto itself. Or it is forced from here per science, per length of IDs, forced space nature transfer away from here. So to be negative value nature, forever nature, therefore, for the development of more temporary / lasting, more forever nature, from somewhere else in space / existence. So we can make all of space / existence the hyper-simultaneous, because that's what it is. Being an individual is being a sequence nature, but it's also being a simultaneous nature. It's being a sequence / simultaneous nature as a trinity. A binary has no, what is binary has no value, for example, but with a computer, only even, with the circuit, only because it has the identity. And the identity has the memory. The identity has the value / value progression. The identity is the volume science relative to the hyper-simultaneous nature, relative to where and how, being locations, areas, ages, sexes. These are sequence / simultaneous natures. It's not just you open the door first for the ladies. They read the stories better for us, like children's books. But no, not in the areas with the HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, for example, which I know you care about. I saw it on, I've seen it on, I just saw it on YouTube. I'll try to get the link for that. Miss Waters. So I still haven't been responded to by the Principal Child Abusers Campus. And they had arrested me and made fake emails to hide what he had confessed and the other names that were brought up with that. And other things that were brought up by people involved with untimely deaths. One on the Trinity College campus in Hartford, and with the people in Wethersfield, and with the Wethersfield police. Families that answered the phones for them through time, different families. It has something to do with how they have Afghanistan, Korea, all these other countries, Italy, involved with medical families, with identity thefts and frauds, fake instances, sought me out, then pretend and just like those were just to fail me. Then I didn't even know where people were going. I didn't communicate with these people. No words. Ask Joe tomorrow. When I recorded, I showed him it was recorded, and he stopped calling because he was involved with and is involved with a whole bunch of people from Central Connecticut State University, involved with children's campuses in Cromwell and Wethersfield and in Rocky Hill and in Hartford, directly and indirectly, and in East Hartford. Now these are police forms that are private and are interbranch and have been through time. These are also foreign and domestic military and overt criminal enterprises involved with their family members. Their roles with interbranch family members, where and how they used confessions from strangers. And then they affected girls to have, I don't know. They had a whole bunch of boyfriends that were at the same time too. I don't know either, who they pretended other that way, and because they have employments with the school, they have influences over all. They have a whole bunch of principals that are victims, where and how their kids are lied to. But that causes a quality of fact-cheating nature. They have called quality of sensibility, where people lie that people are fake and have means to pretend, chaos where therefore mandated law is not followed. This is about where and how mandated law is now being followed by, and how the Constitution was and is unabridged and charged greater than anyone could make a charge. It must lead what we counter as predicate acts, as criminal insidiousness, nature, and wrongdoers relevant. How could one speak properly about American history without using phrases like criminal insidiousness or wrongdoers? They couldn't. There's a reason those are still not forgotten yet, or worse, criminally re-engineered than they already are, criminally re-engineered. So for example, we should take the position that so we can't take a position as parties. We have to go hyper-political. We have to take positions and change the nature of legislation recorded originally and still used remotely, not even realizing how it's even to an extent they have to hide lies though. But criminally foreign influence, self-value used remotely, self-valuing that as fact-sheet in nature. You see the treatments of the January 6th Commission? They're recorded involved with the self-valued roles of investigators. Oh, well, I have faith in that. These people were backed into narratives when you guys were young, all shock and awe, blaming other things, others and or themselves for all the fake sciences in defense of themselves originally and still. Oh, but they were geniuses. They didn't, thank God for the ancients. So males and females are separated. It's exceptions. But we are exception, in other words, and as exception nature. So know how a woman could read a story better than a man to a little child. One way, some ways, a lot of ways. Know how a man, there are exceptions to this too, but how a man could yell and had and has and needs to yell about so many things with so many fake theaters that left out and leave out so many simultaneous proofs and exceptions and exception nature that no one was in the counters. You can't be the they have the only counters, last moment, everything too late, all the time, in collusion. Illusion, collusion. They didn't want to pretend, but it was passions, emotions. Yeah, but they want to bring up the passions and emotions, but they didn't want to talk about what's simultaneous. That's what the passions and emotions bring up. So that the passions and emotions, just talk about what's simultaneous and hyper-simultaneous, because it's about the invisible with anything that is invisible but still discernible. Takes further contemplation. That's why we are individuals. That's why the species is an individual identity of body. An individual body. Everything is in demonstration of the hyper-simultaneous. Being a distinct, non-distinct and hyper-simultaneous relationship to itself. As what most probably and most practically generated all things. One identity of hyper-simultaneous identity of relationship to itself and the increasing value of that. That is what was and is being demonstrated by nature. Also, what denies it and what makes theories that are incapable of defending themselves and affording that practical judgment and perception. It's relevant to where and how people make excuses. Where and how, for example, people make sides on issues like the people would say, the Civil War was or was not about freeing slaves. Slavery was still, people don't even understand how slavery was in the North and South. And with those psychiatry people. And with hundreds of nations, black, white, purple, all these countries that were here. Purple, I don't know if they were, whatever colors they represented. And or represent. People are going for physical culture because they're a certain kind of victim of what had replaced and what has replaced. Increasingly, people valuing that having been. No one spoke for education, honestly, or with the integrity. They value any exception nature to demonstrate, to get away with pretending other. So in other words, they want and need to have debates about things, leaving out the quality of fact-checking nature to show the right outcome. So the wrong outcomes, witch trials, were simultaneous with the slavery. That is hyper positive to discern, to utilize that are the same identity that will cause the negative value nature progressions, acts of nature, and demonstration of roles with those laws, even if it's forced. The same system, the same hyper simultaneous can be used to reveal evolution's fruits, gift, means out of nowhere. You know how sick it is when they say, well, it mixed delusions too, though, when they say hunters gatherers. Obviously, the ancients most probably and demonstrably cultivated positive value nature progressions, acts of nature. There are proofs that the ancients couldn't fathom that anyone could or would make for humanity forget how to cause positive value nature progressions, acts of nature, and or nor its relativity to all identity of the ground locations. And as that system where we contemplate that, oh, but it's money. See, the value. They want to have the value conversations, leave out how there are exceptions to that. How there were exceptions to that. Well, why would the slavery stay after? They were all slaves. Our founding parents, if they gave up their positions and roles with you know, not just England would have been against that. People within all locations, areas, and states had been sustained against Native Americans. That means humanity against humanity. That means they were standing criminal insidiousness natures, wrongdoers, killers, criminal insidious natures, styles of logic, defenses of it. You know, it's not, you know, increasingly incapable of defending that and affording discerned that quality of fact-checking nature that the ancient revealed, only because they let nature reveal the republic for which we stand. See, but this was criminally re-engineered to keep the species identity of volume, the species body, by individual countries A through Z, self-valued, being having been sown prostrate below the foundation of modern nations. As us. So, in other words, all exceptions, and exception nature and demonstration to it, big, beautiful mansions, whatever. All ground locations, probably every year. There are in other words, there used to be worms in the puddles every time it would rain. Every time. You hardly see worms now. The birds, they have to eat different things. Worms walk into water. They feed fish. Their food cycle wants to cause, it's trying to talk to you, not with words. It's trying to make your words speak its system and be the value of its system, be the longing of its system. See, this made that natural longing to an unnatural trap. And so, in other words, CNN and Fox News make each other sick for right reasons. But in the course of that, and in defenses of that, you know, no one can defend rolls with logic with that and afford anyone to have mandated law followed, where and how these networks have been roles attaching people to fake words since the World Trade Center. Our investigations of it. In other words, all these countries were and are criminal together. And the ones who want to deny are only ones, because that's why they're hiding such. They have been used by this which was sophistication before our founders were born, intercampuses, So I never had a conversation with this Kevin Harris, for example, in my life with Quinnipiac University, involved with where and how its evidence is, where and how remotely the fake sophistication pretends other, as the FBI, as the CIA, as the other whatever agencies there are, as their uses of the locations on Main Street in Hartford, as the uses of people's names know, as the uses of the names of locations, of programs. So people get all funny and stuff like that because no one ever had any of those identities backed out from being and having been self-valued, criminal, insidious natures of positive and negative treatments. Humanity has means everywhere we are, in every country, to give our leaders, wanting themselves, us to give them, and them to give us simultaneously, the means to do a plan that adapts and is led by what is its identity of relationship to the grounds really to cause positive damage. We have to afford ourselves to counter where and how the cities and things were put on water, because it was the only means to transport. In other words, we have to make reverse rivers and stuff like that. We could do this. We could do it about how there's an economic going to go and all like that. Do it being led by what? By uses, for example, of evidence how there is no stability. Who's speaking on the other side of bombs in any country with bombs? Who spoke for American history? Who could speak for yin yang and defend what they say now? They don't see the relevance of it. It's that native pure. Who could speak for Native Americans? Already forced to entertain what they can't entertain and afford the short words in the revelations it's about a predicate acts delivery system method. We have to make them be able to say that and not have to fight with people. And we have to make Native Americans and ourselves be able to say it to Native Americans, not have them fight with us. A predicate acts delivery system method, a human fact keeping nature breaching method, was and is against every single person sickly distinctly. So I beg them to agree. I just beg one Native American to agree. Because in the end, I'm sure you all agree. I know you all agree. And anyone who says they don't agree, they're either dishonest or delusions rock, because these are not. I mean, you look at the elderly homes. You see a little box, oh, but that's what the space, yeah, the Space Force is that. What kind of a space is that? You have to anticipate. In other words, we have value systems that increasingly can't defend their logic and afford discern all the revelations that come with the short words. For example, like it was the sentence, it is true that there were and are exceptions, and that you can't legalize things as business and defend the Constitution unabridged. They had to entertain such being and having been entertained because they already had, since semi-ancient times, the identities of locations, areas, and stations, and states, countries A through Z, whatever forms they came from, whatever groups. They have the identity of sciences, of fact treatment nature quality, of names treatments quality, of systems uses, increasingly tactical ulterior, from that sophistication that had been revealed originally. Now, so I still have not been responded to by the campus because the intercities, the interbranch had already painted themselves with what they can't afford. Quality show we will show where and how the courts, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, just rolls with that insidiousness to all locations. We're a measure of value progression. Since with the wagons rhyme, We're on that lake. We're that denatured where they had everyone a slave north and south and couldn't speak. I'll Whisper Creek. Plus, I'll give you guys means to lead through the people going, what are we investing like that? I'll write the scripts and to pay for it, but not for some punk things that are only capable of being done by people who can't even follow mandated law. Can't be mandated law is supposed to be someone asks you to report something. You don't take the side of the police and the courts and the gangs involved with them and the private and the child abusers and all the people involved with them. Exception, nature tied into rich when you deal with them. That's how everyone stops dealing with them and makes a logic conformed, blaming other things other than ourselves, even when right, leaving out everyone's names involved also because of that method. This is uses of it consciously. This method knew and knows and watches and maintains all locations, blaming the real causes of negative value nature, progressive acts of natures, and other things others than ourselves, like slavery. George Washington could tell no lies. So all rise. In other words. And we don't need, they say, oh, what are the evidences? I don't see any evidences. That's why they're pretending they don't see evidences so they can make mistakes in courts. So they can force the wrong outcomes. Originally and still they had sick juries that came through 6 schools. As great people, humanity, as victims, but as victim predators. They have the identities of difference at all locations, including people with disabilities, including because they have the police forms of such that need to hide where and how the locations have been used, where and how we are fact, human nature, reception, and communication. TV stations, please respond. Please fix the fake words and ties to other people that you guys attach me to. Nature's ties to other people too, like this. And with this Joshua Julian, Joshua Stryker, timed on Trinity College and on the principal child abuser's campus. Rolls with other natures of predicate acts with the same people. I never saw them on my street in my life, but with the same people on my street. Also recorded, involved, confessed, and demonstrated, confirmed, involved. Forced rolls by Wethersfield police. I don't know if self-value too or whatever, but forced rolls to an extent were by Wethersfield police, by an Officer Sullivan. A guy who Wethersfield police said was an Officer Sullivan, they confirmed it. Involved with town officers too. These are people involved with town officers through time. A whole bunch of people tied to Central Connecticut State University in downtown locations next to the downtown, next to the state capitol. I don't know in other words, there's people involved with the uses of principals, families, journalists, military. So they have everyone speaking to others. All exceptions, exception nature too, they were recorded have employed that way. Because they have the Trinity per one method, measured and maintained, self-valued, positive, criminal and seditious natures of positive and negative treatments. And that's the subject. And they're forcing the time treatment simultaneously, too fast, too slow. They're forcing things that weren't and aren't debatable, and you're calling names to people who are anyone who want to use these, because then we go into the fight together and everything breaks. It's like nothing. You imagine China, America, and Russia working together, and with England and all of them. The Middle East, no, I didn't forget you guys. Allah. Alpha longs, long alphas high. There are proofs that value O and value A. They're relative to this conversation about the relativity to this conversation about the invisible / hyper invisible.